In this section, we're going to go through some of the Agile basics, some of the basics that we do in Flow. They overlap, and this will help you start to better understand what it is that we're trying to get to and create. We're going to look a little bit about Agile's roots. The purpose of this video, we're going to look at some culture. We're going to talk about simplicity, the Stacy diagram, Cynefin, and then also some of how we'll use Cynefin to show how Agile purists and management consultants sort of overlap in their work. And then we'll talk a little bit about flow and the basics of flow and the things that we're looking at with definitions and things like that. So there's quite a bit in this section, and we'll dive in and give you the basics with which we're working. The leadership takeaways for this section are: flow-based Agile training doesn't replace Agile training. This is in addition to whatever Agile training you've already received. And remember, flow is a leadership framework that sits above the team, program, and portfolio levels. And it's a way for you to be able to work with and influence all of those levels and to provide the leadership that is needed to succeed at each of those levels. There's a couple slides in this video or the next one that may have come from earlier parts of the training. If you see something that has a little FCP light teal colored dot sort of to your left on the middle of the slide, it'll say FCP, comma, etc. And it's a little circle. If you see that, then that's a signal to you that you can skip that slide if you want. They're typically not very long, so maybe the repetition isn't a bad thing. Now, as I mentioned on the very first slide, this presentation isn't intended to replace any of your regular Scrum or Agile training. This is in addition to what you've already learned from other experts in the field. These videos or slides in this video gives you additional insight how to turbocharge your own Agile work, your team, and eventually your entire organization. So if you're going to be taking one of the Agile certification courses, and I would recommend going after the PSM-1 Professional Scrum Master with scrum.org. If you want to get that, it's a one-time permanent certification, and it eliminates the certification mill issues that you'll encounter with some of the other certifications where you have to continually renew, and there's all kinds of extra stuff put in that. So the purpose of this is to help you take what you've already learned and basically turbocharge it for yourself, for your teams, and your organization. Agile's not new. Sorry, it's been around for a long time. The predecessors were Lean. Lean production has been out there for decades. I was taught that 27 years ago in my MBA program, and that was 10 years after my BBA program. So Lean and theories of constraints has been around for a long time. In fact, when the Ford engineers and leaders went over to Japan to find out what Toyota was doing, the guys at Toyota took out a book, dusted it off, handed it across the table to the Ford executives, and the Ford executives asked, "Well, what's that?" And they said, "Well, this is Lean. That we followed Henry Ford's book, and it was a book written by Henry Ford on how to do serial production." And the Japanese applied statistics and just-in-time thinking, Kanban, Kaizen, all of these different concepts and ideas to that continuous improvement. And they basically took Henry Ford and put it on steroids. And so the Ford executives were somewhat embarrassed that they had in their possession the roadmap, the knowledge, they just didn't apply it. And they didn't listen to the experts of their day and ended up paying a very dramatic price for not paying attention. And so you'll also see people mentioning Lean Six Sigma, things like that. Rapid prototyping, Malcolm Baldrige Award, Quality Award. There's so much out there. So Agile, as it was applied into the software world, took many of those lean production ideas and applied it to software development, and voila, you have Agile. So I know this isn't a perfect history lesson, but it gives you an idea that Agile's not new. It's been around for a long time. Many of the tactics and techniques that we use in Agile have been around for as long as 2,500 years. If you go back to our book, Nehemiah Effect, we went back 2,500 years and found the world's oldest Agile project done in an Agile fashion. So pick up a copy of Nehemiah Effect and read it, and it will help you understand what Nehemiah did already 2,500 years ago. And he used Agile on a construction project. Okay, so to suggest that Agile only works for software isn't true. We've used Agile with construction companies, we've used Agile with manufacturers, and over and over and over again, we get the same remarkable results. So, Agile's in a way not really new. It's only new in the sense that the manifesto was put into place about 19 years ago. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later in this presentation. I know there's a lot of people out there that enjoy Dilbert. I know I do. And these are really good. For example, in this one, Dilbert's telling the pointy-haired boss, hey, we need 3 more programmers. And the pointy-haired boss goes, well, use Agile programming methods. And Dilbert tries to explain to the pointy-haired boss, Agile programming doesn't just mean doing more work with fewer people. And the pointy-haired boss is like, find me some words that do mean that and ask again. And I think we all run into that about there's a lot of misunderstanding when you get into that middle layer of management. And there's a lot of people who are talking the talk, but they're not necessarily walking the walk. And we go through that in the transformation video series that I've done. And we also go through that in the Flow Certified Professional video series that I've also done. It's not enough to just talk the talk, you have to walk the talk. It's not enough to do Agile, you have to be Agile. And so humor is a great way to start to bring home that point that there's a lot of change that has to take place at every level, and we're here to help you. And we're here to help you understand what your new role is as a leader in the company. So there's going to be a lot of disruption and a lot of people who are going to find it very uncomfortable to have to switch to a new role. Here's another Dilbert one. We're glad Agile has a name. And the pointy-haired boss is like, hey, we're going to try something called Agile programming. That means no more planning, no more documentation, just start writing code and complaining. Wally goes, I'm glad it has a name. And the pointy-haired boss is looking over at Dilbert and goes, that was your training. And so there's a lot of myths out there in Agile. And one of the myths is that we don't do documentation. Well, that's just simply not true. Especially if you're dealing with actual real products that you're producing that can put people's lives at risk, whether it's in the automotive or aerospace industry or any similar industry where our product could actually put a person at risk. In that case, we are going to continue to do the documentation that's required by either legal regulation or laws or whatever, that's not going to go away. And it's not that we're not going to do any more planning. We still do planning. That's what sprint planning is all about. That's what the workshops are all about for building the product backlogs, and then even starting to do longer range release planning and product roadmaps. And the product owner, the product manager, the Scrum Master, and Agile coach, they all might be working together on that to create those both for the team, for the program level, for the portfolio level, and ultimately for the executive level. This slide I recently brought back out of retirement, and I've been using this slide for quite a while. This was from a Scrum Agile presentation, September 2007. So for the better part of 13 years, I've been using this slide to sort of demonstrate the importance of definitions and why those are so important. And this was from a study by Microsoft. You remember people would click on help Microsoft improve the Office suite. And looking across all of the products, Word, Outlook, Excel, PowerPoint, all the different Office products that they had in the suite, they tracked what people were actually using. And they found out that 7% of the features were used all the time. 13% were used often. 16% some of the time. And here's where it gets really interesting. 19% were rarely used. 45% were never used, almost half. But 64%, almost 2/3, were rarely or never used. And if you add in the sum of the times in there, it becomes an 80% to 20% and 80-20 Pareto, which I find that very interesting. Pareto was the Italian economist that came up with the 80-20 usage. And this seems to have held true. And so I guess my point in this would be, if people are never going to use them or rarely ever going to use those features, why are they in the backlog? Why are they in your work breakdown structure for the project that you're trying to do? If people aren't going to use them, why are you spending a single penny on developing that feature? It's a waste. You could argue, oh, well, we use it for marketing purposes. Oh, okay. I could go with that a little bit, because they could be trying to say, well, we've got all the features you could ever need. Well, true. But the point is that there were features created where they're just never used, almost half. That means, how many hundreds of millions of dollars were sunk into developing the Microsoft Office suite? Let's just say it was 100 million. Okay, make it easy. That means that 64 million should have never have been spent. Okay, they could have taken that and invested it in other products, other projects, other programs, other portfolios, and probably have gotten a much better return on their investment. And what's interesting about this is that this also sort of mirrors the success slides that I included up in the brutal facts section of this video, where traditional succeeded like what, anywhere from 14 to 16% of the time. Well, 16% isn't that far off from 20%. And so the ratio is almost the same. And so if you're looking at all the other failure that the traditional projects have had, it is again reflected in these numbers. And I just think that that's really fascinating. But the main point is, and that's why the 4D model in flow starts with definitions. You got to get the definitions right. And then you have to distill agreement and then deliver, and then drive by checking it against the vision in a cadence or rhythm where you're double checking it all along the way to make sure that we're still on track for achieving what we wanted to achieve. So this is a really good slide. I know I went a little long on this particular slide, but I think you get the point. Definitions will make or break your project or your product. It hasn't changed for traditional or for agile methodologies. Probably the most brutal of all of these facts that we've gone through earlier, everything from how dismal traditional project management performs to even agile still not making it more than half of the time, is that in the end, it all boils down to results. And so when we're talking about results, the executives are going to be looking at, are we doing the right thing? Are we increasing revenues? Are we decreasing costs? Are we getting rid of or mitigating risk? Those are the three primary things an executive will look at, and all of those fall under the category of doing the right thing. And as I was looking at doing the right thing, it hit me that, oh, well, this is the 4R model. This is part of flow. This is what it's all about in flow. Is we begin with the right truth, we look at the right values and attitudes and distill those from the right truth. Hopefully, if you have the right values and attitudes, you'll do the right thing, okay? You'll do right actions. And ultimately, as we work our way around this iterative process, you'll get the right results. And in the Flow Certified Professional Training, I teach you how to use this in reverse as a root cause analysis tool. And we also talk about the vision of the individual and the individual's spirit, and how each and every individual has a VSPT, a vision, a strategy, their projects and tasks that they're doing that ultimately tie to the rest of the organization. And so an individual needs to link, how am I increasing revenues? How am I decreasing costs? How am I helping to get rid of or mitigate risk? That's the value you're bringing down to the table. And in the end, it all boils down to results, because you need to answer the question for yourself as the employee, what's in it for me? But you need to answer the same question for the boss, what's in it for them? Okay? Because you have to balance those. And it's from there that flow flows. And so this is actually, the 4R model is the mirror image of the 4D model. The 4R model we use at the individual level. The 4D model, which is define, distill, deliver, and drive, we use that for the team and the product and the program and the portfolio and the executive level as well. But since individuals are at every one of those levels and in all those areas, the 4R model applies as well. So, in spite of everything else, the most brutal of all facts is it boils down to results. I put in some slides here. This is the 10th annual State of Agile survey from version 1. And the primary purpose, you can download this from version 1. They've got like all of the different annual State of Agile surveys there, so you can go back and look through through these yourself at your leisure. But for here, the 10th annual, which is about 3-4 years ago, I think it's 4 years ago now, about 74% of all Agile was Scrum. Scrum was 58%, Scrum XP Hybrid was another 10. If you throw in Scrumban, that's an additional 7%. It came out to 74%. And so, you know, there's different ways to present these statistics, and they were probably trying not to bunch everything together. But the reality is Scrum and Scrum combos, I won't necessarily call them hybrids because they have a different thing for hybrids, and that can be a hybrid of anything. But for those that are using Scrum directly, Scrum, Scrum XP, or Scrumban, when you're looking at those, that's 74% for the 10th annual. In the 11th annual, it was 75%, so the Scrum amount stayed at 58%, and XP hybrid was still 10%, but the Scrum bond went up to 8% this particular year. So it starts to give you a little bit of a feeling for how stable these numbers actually are. In the 12th annual, you'll notice that Scrum went down to 56%. The Scrum XP hybrid went down to 6% from 10. Scrumban held at 8%. But still, we're talking 70%. So you're talking somewhere between 70 and 75% of all Agile methodologies is Scrum. And in the 13th annual, you'll notice that it started going back up a little bit. It had gone to 70% the year before. Now we're back up to 72%, where Scrum was 54%, Scrum XP Hybrid was 10%, and Scrumban has been holding steady at 8%, or for pretty much 3 out of those 4 years, if not 4, every year. So this is just to give you a feel for when people are talking about Agile, you'll hear people make very dogmatic statements that Scrum is not Agile and Agile is not Scrum. Well, that's partly true, but almost anywhere from 70 to 75% of Agile is Scrum. So to ignore Scrum, do so at your own peril. And there's a lot of misconceptions out there about Scrum, and there are tons of lousy Scrum implementations where somebody read the book, has no experience, they didn't bring in any coaches to help them, and they make all the rookie mistakes and beyond. So just because a person is certified to do Scrum, that doesn't necessarily mean they've actually used those skills or have used them in the real world, or even have the battle scars to be able to help you actually do Scrum correctly. So training's a great place to start, but it requires coaching and mentoring along the way while the teams are working in order to actually get full value out of your investment into Scrum and Agile. Once again, Dilbert just delivers. I love it. The pointy hair boss is telling Dilbert, hey, I'm giving you another software project to work on at the same time as your main project. And Dilbert's like, that will ruin my flow. It will take too long to reset my brain when I switch between projects. Pointy hair boss asks him, have you tried working longer hours without extra pay? Dilbert's like, yes, I have. And there's a couple beautiful things in this picture. First, personal heroics are not sustainable. If you are working 60 to 80 hours a week, or even over 50 hours a week, the studies have already shown that your quality will be going down dramatically. So this is very typical in the consulting world, where people are working 60, 70, 80 hours a week because they have to stay ahead of the competition. In the end, it's not sustainable. They're going to burn themselves out, and they could even literally die by working too much. It's not sustainable. And the other thing that's in this picture that's just beautiful is the concept of task switching. There are so many scholarly articles out there about task switching that just switching between two tasks, the reset time is measured in like tens of minutes, and it's very difficult to switch back and forth. It's like being a guy on the battleship who's a gunner, and you've got two airplanes coming at you at the same time, and it's like, well, which one do I shoot? And the gun's just going back and forth, and it's not hitting either of them. and so when they're shooting at the incoming targets. And so it is a strategy of executives to overload the system. They call it pressurizing the system. And if you work in a matrix organization where you're assigned to multiple projects at the same time, um, that's not going to be a good situation because you're going to lose your focus and you're not going to be able to deliver. And so, between the task switching and working incredible amounts of overtime for extended periods of time, neither of those work. It's been proven over and over again, so I'm really confused as to why any company would continue to expect that of their employees. To me, that's just, I can't understand that at all. So in this video, we looked at flow-based Agile. And a reminder, it doesn't replace your Agile training. There's a couple more videos to go with this. And we went through the Agile roots, the definitions, results, and team level. The application here is that flow makes Agile work really, really well at the team level, the product level, the program level, the portfolio level, and the organizational level. If you have an organization that isn't able to adapt in an Agile way, what you're going to end up with is pockets of excellence. And if you have a pocket of excellence, well, that's great for that team, but that doesn't help the whole organization. So as a leader and as an executive, you need to look at this holistically and figure out how can I duplicate that pocket of excellence into the other areas and into the other teams to encourage them to pursue excellence and to look at how they can deliver consistently remarkable results that can be duplicated.